some time involved in doing that, but also who determines what's the source of how that dial is set. And he would go and put the dial at high, and then he'd get calls from the city council saying, well, it should be extreme. Yeah. So that there's always kind of a subjective element in those signs. And then additionally, that kind of sign puts the burden on the city. In other words, we're the ones that have to make that evaluation, the decision. And in the case of avalanches, there is no avalanche, no instrumentation on Loafer Mountain or on Santaquin Peak that the information that we're getting on what the avalanche danger is coming from Provo, and it may not really be applicable to so to have a sign there at Deep Forest Circle or at the trailhead saying the avalanche is moderate or high or extreme may not really be accurate, and it also kind of puts the burden of responsibility on the city for making that evaluation. When what Craig proposed is we make some kind of sign that puts the burden on the user for entering the area at their own risk, and put the phone number for the Utah Avalanche Center and have them call for current avalanche conditions, and make them more responsible for their own behavior in the backcountry. Most of the avalanches that have occurred there, and the most serious ones, generally don't even cross onto Woodland Hills city property. They're on state land, and so for us to try to take responsibility or determine what the risk is on state land probably would not be appropriate. So that was kind of the counsel we received from Craig and others. So I'm still waiting for information from the Utah Avalanche Center, but when we receive that, are there those that might want to be involved in proposing a sign, creating a sign, and submitting that to the city council? Anybody have a particular interest in the backcountry or avalanche conditions, monitoring those?
Well, Greg, who's going to put the sign up? I don't think it should be John Q. Public, because then we're liable if we don't put it up.
Yeah, it would be the city. But
Okay.
we would propose the verbiage for that sign and submit that to the city council for approval. Doral, does that sound like an appropriate course of action?
Yeah, I appreciate what you said, that Craig's explanation of it was good, in that if the city even misses posting and then there is an avalanche and someone's hurt, it kind of places liability because we didn't have a sign up. So it's a tricky thing, but I like your idea of maybe putting a sign up maybe in the late fall and have that information you listed, a phone number and so on, and put the burden on the person instead of the us putting the right words on the sign. But I like the idea of this group proposing a sign and what it might look like. I just personally have a problem trying to take responsibility for others, even if we forget to change the sign.
Well, I can route around to you some sample signs that I just pulled off the internet and are used by communities, mountain communities across the country.
Okay.
And it would basically say, warning, seasonal avalanche, risk. Enter at your own risk. And for information on current conditions, go to this website or call the Utah Avalanche Center. And that might be all it takes. And it doesn't have to be a huge sign, doesn't have to have flashing lights or warning. It's a fairly simple thing, but it just lets people know that there is a risk there. Over the course of any given summer, in our backcountry, there may only be 4 or 5 days a week where there's really a serious avalanche risk. But our residents and users of the trail should be aware of that.
Do
Okay,
you think then we have to do the same thing with what the city's already mitigated for mudslide? Are we setting a precedent for all dangers that need to be posted?
like what other dangers?
Well, what we've just mitigated for, mudslide, debris flow. Do we then have to put up signs for everything?
I don't think so, but is there some other?
Sherry asked a valid question. Where do you draw the line?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Avalanche is obviously a seasonal thing. But yeah, when it's not avalanche season, then you're looking at the potential midsummer and it rains heavy. You can't fix stupid as far as what people do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, where do you draw the line?
Well, I think something along the lines of a public notice or sign that says area prone to natural conditions, i.e. mudslides, avalanche, whatever, enter at your own risk. If that legally protects the city and us as a trails committee who proposed that, then that kind of covers all the bases, any natural area prone to natural catastrophes, i.e. mudslides, avalanche, enter at your own risk. Maybe something like that, something more generic than specific, like limiting it to avalanche.
okay, good. Natalie, you were raising your hand. And welcome. Glad to have you
Thank
join
you.
us.
Thanks, Greg. He basically said what I was thinking, that just a sign that covers all the bases, that basically you're responsible for your own well-being, I guess.
Yeah. And the same principle applies to anybody that enters, goes off into the wilderness. They're accepting risk for rock slides, avalanche, falling off the edge, being bitten by a bee or a mountain lion, whatever. So those risks are inherent in the outdoors.
Well, we want to be careful about the term mudslide. We have a problem with flash floods that sometimes bring mud down. But if you have a home and the city says, well, you're in danger of mudslide, your insurance is going to go up. It's a different thing than a flash flood. I know that because I lived on Sky Lake when we had a flash flood that filled up one of the neighbors' basements with mud. And they were
that's
very
right.
careful to term that a flash flood instead of a mudslide, because it was a flash flood that brought debris and as well as some mud down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I guess that begs the question, do we want to put up anything? Do we want to put up avalanche? Do we want to put up anything? Because there's so many, like Greg was saying, you could be bit by a spider or whatever. Where do we draw the line? Do we want to even put a line? Is the city liable now, Doral, not putting up anything?
I can only share a different mayor's perspective. About 8 years ago, the mayor's attitude was, and this is not Wendy, he said, we don't want to put up any kind of warning signs because if it's just as you've been saying, maybe we don't list them all, or maybe maybe the sign is turned off, so to speak, and then someone was hurt, then the city might be liable. He didn't want to be liable for anything, and there's a mix of the way leaders in the city believe, and so I just kind of would like to see an agreed view to take by this committee and present it, and it may get thrown out, but it might also help. Just if I could say real quickly, we moved here in 1999, and we spent the first 3 years hiking that mountain straight up the gullies, and we were snowshoeing several weekends in a row. And then we didn't go one weekend, and there was a huge avalanche, and it was the biggest one that ever hit the city. And it never even crossed our minds, due to stupidity, that we came a weekend away from getting hit. So it was because we didn't know that was a possibility in our mountain. And so I favor a sign that would educate and not try to cover all the bases, but at least let people know. I believe it could save a life, and that's what we're after.
I've seen some samples of those kinds of signs that do educate, that inform people what is a typical avalanche slope. It's between 30 and 45 degrees. And what are avalanche conditions? It's usually heavy, wet snow on top of a layer of ice that creates a slab. So there's some education that can take place on that sign too. I think it's at least prudent that we propose to the city a sign, and it could be simple, but I think it just lets users of the backcountry know what the risks are and that they need to be aware of those.
Well, where do you propose to put it?
I would put it up where the current nature interpretive nature sign is. That's, at least for now, that's kind of the trailhead, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
because that would cover the switchbacks, and it would cover, what's the name of that canyon? I can never remember, where the big avalanche came down.
Broad Hollow.
Broad Hollow.
Broad Hollow.
Because because you wanted to cover
Oh.
all places in the city. I mean, the biggest one was in Broad Hollow. The one up there on Switchback 7 happens probably every year, is my guess.
Well, I think, Greg, I think we ought to have some sort of a sign. As a committee, our job is to make recommendations to the city. It's not to make policy. The city's responsibility is to make the policy. So if we make a recommendation, then I think we've done our bit, and it's up to the city then to decide yay or nay.
Okay, we'll do that, and I'll be, I hope to hear back from Utah Avalanche Center with some proposals. They may even have some signs that aren't being used that they can donate to us, but
Yeah.
we'll see what's available.
Well, so you'll send those out to the whole PTR committee for input
Yes,
once you.
probably over the
Okay.
next month.
Okay.
Okay, and next, the budget recommendation to Finance Committee and City Council. Sherry, are there specific items there that is this something that we take up with Doral, or?
Well, I think we give a recommendation to the Finance Committee, but I'm not sure if we have to be specific, if it's for $5,000 for maintaining the trail and the water bars. I don't know how much that's going to cost. And fencing, or can we just say we need $20,000, and if we don't use it, the city throws it in their slush fund?
I think it would be more, have more of an impact on the city if they knew that we did our homework and we came up with figures that we could back up. If we want 15,000, then we ought to be able to tell the city, itemize that. Otherwise, the city may think well, they're just throwing out a figure and being lazy about the whole process. So I think we need to itemize the things that we want, and then get a price, get a couple bids, and then present that. I think that's more professional, and I think it lets the city know that we're on the ball and we're serious and we're just not flying by the seat of our pants.
And
Well, we're in a
all
time
that
crunch.
Laurel, when do you guys start? your
budgeting
budget
process,
preparation?
when does
We-
that take place?
We have a budget meeting planned in the last week of March.
Okay.
So this is kind of the meeting. But we would appreciate,
away.
what Jeff said, an itemized list with best guess numbers attached to it. It would help us allocate funds if the council thought some of those items were just really needed to be done. So
Well, I think too, Doral, given that, we've kind of started this process later than we, due to the fact that we haven't been organized. I think if we could give a ballpark figure and then let the city know that we're working on fine tuning those, and I think it just gives us more credibility.
Greg, I might suggest too that you, along with that you write some justification so that there's a significance attached to that particular figure. Those who are looking at it may not have the understanding that you do of it, and that could make a difference overall in it. So I not only would have put the itemized issue down in money, but some justification for it in your view.
Good point. Good point.
Okay.
So when do we need to get this, to the finance committee or to the city council before the end of March? Is it your fourth Tuesday in March meeting?
it'll be Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday of the last week of March. I'm sorry, they just sent an email today trying to pick from 3 dates.
Is that the drop dead date, Doral, to have figures?
24th, 25th, or 26th. Now that is not the drop dead date, but it's the initial budget retreat meeting, they call it, where each department presents its dreams and wishes. And you're right, the justification would help. If you said something like, if you needed money for helping with the split rail fencing, that's a high priority to the city. You don't need to worry about irrigating the park. That's all automatic, and there are funds that go in every year for that. But any trail building or maintenance, or if it costs us to become a dark night city, whatever that's called. Sorry, Sherry.
Oh, you're good.
Those
It's
kind of
only
things.
250. That's not an expensive item.
Well, yeah, and that would be nice to just be that specific and give that information to the city.
Okay.
Okay.
So if we had it to you by the 22nd of March,
That would be
ballpark
okay.
figure that we could adjust if we needed to?
Yes,
Okay.
that would really help.
Could we create a subcommittee here, just a group of 4 or 5 of us on the committee to come up with some figures and submit some numbers to the budget committee by the 22nd?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I'd
might
like-
I suggest that the subcommittee committees for parks, trails, what was the other one? That would include the dark sky, natural
Okay.
resources or whatever. I don't think
Well,
we
yes.
have a recreation. Come up with their own figures. And then we don't have to form another committee.
We could, we don't have those subcommittees fully organized yet. Maybe a little more efficient just to have the executive committee come up with a proposal and route that around to the full committee members, all the committee members. Anyway, I don't have a,
Okay, I'm good with that.
Well,
one way or
we
the
could do
other.
that, we could do that, or individually, we could just submit 2 or 3 ideas to yourself, Greg, and
To the whole
Yeah.
committee.
I got
well,
nothing. And
we all have ideas, I
I'll kind of
guess.
summarize those and route them around, but I can imagine some things that will already be on that list.
Well, for example, you've done so much homework on the fencing. You have a number for that.
But that's going
Yeah.
through Woodland Hills
Okay.
Outdoors.
Keep in mind that the fencing and that's all going to be handled under a grant. So we're not asking the city for any funds related to
Oh.
fencing or other, putting the trail through the park or other things. I think we're talking about funding for
Okay.
2022.
Okay, so the fencing would not be part of our budget.
No.
Okay,
Well, it could be if we decide to fence off something.
And Doral, just to check the timing, is the city's fiscal year January 1st, 2022 to December
June.
31st?
It's June to June,
June to June, okay.
or July, but yeah, we start in the spring, and this will be the first meeting for the city coming up in March. And then we have to have a public hearing and so on as we get close. That comes around in April and May.
Okay.
But there's plenty of time here to get your input and present it to the city.
Okay, well, we'll get that to you and
Doral? I mean,
I think we have some.
before anybody spends too much time on this, Doral, I mean, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, what's a number that's, I mean, if we come in with the wish list of 20 and the city's only to kick 5,000 loose, I mean, what's a realistic number for us to give you, I guess, is my question.
I think anything above 10 is really, put it, maybe greedy this year,
Okay.
but
So as we present numbers, 10 or under is probably something at least worth pursuing.
it all comes into the justification for it.
Gotcha.
If you're doing something that's going to help every citizen in Woodland Hills, it's all weighed with everything else that we're spending money on.
All right. So don't come up with a $50,000 wish list because it's probably not going to happen. Right?
I
There
think it
goes
might.
the pickleball court.
Well, I think Wayne's comment was good, that we need to establish, justification and make our case.
Hey, Doral, quick
Okay.
question. Does the city allow donated time? I mean, donated time, I would say, if we factored that into some of these initiatives, just thinking if there was, for example, excavation work that needed to happen.
That's very strong. Donated time along with a few dollars from the city to help is it's huge. That's a huge selling point, is if you've got 10 people that are willing to do this much with $100, it goes a long ways. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Good.
I think many of you know that's what we did with the grass at the park, right? That
Yeah.
was the expense of the grass, but everyone that wanted to participate was able to come and join in. We had 100+ people there at the park helping to lay the sod and so forth.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
So as we think through things that we want to do, I know that there would be folks that would be willing to donate time and maybe resources as well. So
Good point.
Okay, can we move on to the Park Pavilion reservation form and process? And Doral, I was there for the work session on at the city council meeting last week. I was not there for the actual city council meeting, but they wanted to have us specify certain exceptions, or what was the kind of the nature of the?
Well, the document you you gave us from this committee to pass as an agreed document that people would fill in and sign for access or for reserving the pavilion, they saw a couple of holes in it regarding what could be done. I mean, I think it said no fires at all, but we have an ordinance in the city that allows liquid fuel fires. We can do it in our homes. We can barbecue outside with propane and so on. Those things are allowed at the park, but in that area, in that public facility, we need to maybe state that in that document if we could, so they were aware what that was. And it should state like the default hours, and I think it did. But there are occasions where people want a special permit to spend the night. They had a bunch of Cub Scouts up there spending the night one recently, and well, in the summer, and it was permitted. So that was a concern that it ought to at least be included in the sign-up document, so that the city knew what was going to go on and what their intentions were for overnight or just evening and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, here was my rationale in not including those. And that is, I think we were creating a single form, and that was our charge, our instructions, create a single form that could be put online, that users and someone who wants to reserve the pavilion could go and complete the form and submit it, and submit their deposit, and have it taken care of. It was intended to cover 99% of the users. There will always be exceptions. There will always be those who want to have some, whether it's Cub Scouts doing an overnighter, and I have no problem accommodating those exceptions. You know, I think we have city employees. I don't think that the city council or that the commission, the Parks, Trails, Recreation Committee should be involved in every single use decision. We have city employees that are smart, qualified, and able to make those decisions. If, for example, with the Christmas party, they permitted us to have propane powered heaters. Okay, so it was December 23rd. It was freezing cold. We had a foot of snow, and there was no fire risk. So getting an exception to put those heaters down was you know, that was great. At the same time, I asked, can we have sparklers? And Craig said no, and I had no problem abiding by that decision. So I think we need to enable our city employees to, in cases where there is an exception being requested, to make those decisions on their own, without having to include every possible exception or every possible unusual use on the form. If I can just kind of give a quick example, quick analogy. About 20 years ago, tied to the church, about 20 years ago, the church had a handbook of instructions that had every month they would send out updates. It was a voluminous handbook, and they would send out updates. And I'd read those updates as they came out, and they would be things like, no bagpipes allowed in the chapel, or no motorcycles are permitted in the cultural hall. And obviously what happened is that in some obscure ward or branch somewhere, that happened, and it caused a problem. And so they issue this for the whole church. And then about 10 years ago, they changed that, and they put the whole thing online and reduced the size of the volume by about 30%. I would rather go in that direction of making this form more a more general document that's intended to cover the needs of 99% of the users and allow city employees to handle those exceptions. We can never foresee or outguess what those exceptions are going to be and include them all in the form. Anyway, that's my, and I'm happy to share that perspective with the city council or anyone, but that's kind of where I.
Well, I think we have a way to address some of the city council's concerns here that Darrell sent us an email about. You know, the liquid fuel, if we were to have, let's say, I'm going to say 2, I don't think we need any more than 2. You know, when you go into the state parks and the federal parks, how they have those kind of, it's a flat surface up on a pole and it's got like a little border around it where you can put your propane stove. Then people wouldn't be putting their propane stoves in the pavilion on the tables. It would be outside the pavilion, and people know what those are for.
Yeah, well, on the form that we submitted to the city council, we did have a line that said, please advise us of any other uses that you may have that might incur additional cost or run afoul of city ordinances. And we use as an example what do you call those bounce toys where that could do damage to the grass, or a water slide that could use excess amount of water. And so we had a line on the form where the applicant could advise the city of those potential abuses or things that could cause damage. But to try to outguess every potential problem or misuse, I think that's impossible.
Well, Doral mentioned hours too, you know, for using things in the park. Right now in the general plan, it says that the park is open from the park is closed from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Yet the disturbing the peace ordinance says 10:30. And as my personal opinion, as far as camping in the park, there's also in the city ordinances about if you're under 16 and under, you have to have a parent there, or I forget the exact wording, a competent adult who's someone who's 18. Most of the people that, for us up here anyway, that use the trail are from out of town. They're not your local Cub Scout group or Boy Scouts, which we don't even have anymore, who would want to camp out in the park. If this is opened up to camping, I think we're going to have a real problem, because it even says in the ordinances that you can be arrested for infringing upon these ordinances. And who's going to arrest you? The sheriff cannot, what's the right word? The sheriff cannot cite anyone having to do with the city ordinance. So who is it? Craig? Craig's going to come up in the middle of the night and arrest somebody? Craig can't arrest anybody. The city ordinances need to be looked at and conformed in terms of the city's public facilities. So when you say time, Doral, I don't know. I think it's good that it's closed 11 to 6 or 10:30 to 6. John, what's your opinion? You've been talking lately how, you know, there's people in that park really
That
early in
park-
the morning till late
That
at night.
park is used so much. I'm being a resident that lives very close to the park. I am not thrilled at all about any camping. So I realize maybe they've done some scouts or cubs in the past. Obviously, I'm not aware of it, but I've only lived here 3.5 years. But yeah, I'm not keen on it. Doral, I am amazed at how much that park's used. 6, 7, 8 in the morning till 9, 10, 11 at night, 365 days a year. It doesn't matter how much snow there is always something and somebody over there, always constant, all day long.
Well, I think the question at hand here, though, is do we want to include all those ordinances and all those exceptions on the form? No.
Uh,
Okay,
You'd be giving them a book, not a form.
okay.
Yeah,
And
Take a simple form with an understanding that if somebody wants to deviate outside that form, they need to contact Jody and deal with those exceptions.
so Doral, are you
Well,
you kind of
Wayne,
okay if I
what-
just return this to the city council and
Yeah. Wayne, what do you think the council is after?
Well, one of the use of liquid fuels is not an exception. That's approved. So that could easily be included in things. I understand that there may be exceptions and let the city make rules on or decisions on those exceptions. But I think what is allowed ought to be included on the sheet. And I think that's the point that one of the points that the city council was making. If it's allowed, include it on the sheet so it doesn't come up, so people don't end up not using it because they think something's not allowed when it is. So, you could put like, these are the hours. If there's an exception to that, it has to be granted by the city. So they know that extra work has to be done. I just use that as an example. But I personally, I don't know why the city didn't accept what you did and then add to it a little bit. I mean, that's their prerogative. If there was a couple of things that they were thinking of that, well, let's allow this. Personally, I didn't see a reason that they needed to send it back to you all for that. They could have just added a couple of other check mark things to the list that you had done up, but they didn't do that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thanks, Wayne. I prefer that this committee just say to the council, look, let's keep this form close to the way it is. Let's make sure the hours are in there. And by default, those are the rules. And liquid fuel is allowed. And that's the end. I think that would appease the council.
so what hours are we thinking about to make this proposal to the city committee? What hours? Right now, it's closed from 11 PM to 6 AM,
Well,
according to the general plan.
I like at least those hours. I know on the 4th of July and other nights, people stay later there, but those are the exception and not the regular hours. I prefer 10, but I think your
I like
form
10.
said, I think your form said 11. And those are okay. I really like what you said, Greg. We don't need to put everything in it that is allowed and not allowed, but let's put what Wayne said. Let's put in what is allowed and give the hours, and this committee can recommend those hours.
So what are we thinking, committee, in terms of hours?
Well, let's be consistent with what the ordinance says in the city,
Well, that can be changed.
or whatever the ordinance is. We could put that in the form, whatever the ordinance is at the time of reserving the pavilion and the grounds, that is the time. I don't know.
Well, that makes people
think we're
have to look
splitting
up the
hairs.
ordinance.
I think this, so Doral, so the city kicked it back to the committee. They didn't make a decision. They kicked it back.
Just because the city didn't feel like we wanted to change something you created without your input one more time. And
Okay,
and I think it's close, actually.
okay.
Well, is the committee in favor of having the park closed 10 to 6? I mean, whatever you can do before 11, you can do before 10.
Yeah.
You can just
And
do
the-
more of it to 11.
There is no ordinance as far as the time for the park. It's just in the general plan.
in fact,
So,
when I put 11 o'clock on that form, it was just a number that appeared on the city's website. So
Yep.
I didn't make it up. It was already on the
Right.
city's website.
What's the 10:30 ordinance?
that's the disturbing the peace. after 10:30 at night. It's ordinance number, it has to do with curfew hours.
And if there is an ordinance that says 10:30, then maybe we put that on the form.
I think 10:30 sounds good. Fireworks are done at 10 most often, and that gives them a half hour to get out of there, and
Okay,
that works for me, but
Me too.
If you've got a
10:30.
curfew time, that's a good time to follow, I think.
Yeah, and
10:30.
by the way, there's more homes around the park than there were 5
Yeah.
years
no,
yeah.
ago. And we need to respect the new homeowners there.
I'm just concerned about all the lovers that are there at night that are going to be affected by this new curfew.
We'll send them down to your house, Brett.
And I get to see them all the time, and I just, I want them to have a voice as well. So I like 10:30. I think 10:30 is good.
10:30 is good, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
That'll keep the drug deals down, maybe.
well, but then that begs the question too, who enforces this? Like it says in the ordinance, they'll be arrested. That implies the sheriff, and the sheriff
we-
cannot enforce an ordinance.
Sherry, Sherry, let me correct something. That's not correct. The word has gotten out there, and I don't know why. There's extra things that need to be done, but the sheriff's office can enforce our ordinances. If the violation for them is a misdemeanor, or I don't think any of them are felonies, but a lot of violations are misdemeanors, and the sheriff can enforce those. Now, maybe something we need to clear up with the sheriff's office, but they can enforce those misdemeanor affected ordinances that we have.
Okay, I'll send an email to the city council about that, because Sean Peterson told me he could not enforce our ordinances. So he's under the impression that he can't.
Okay.
I've learned each deputy enforces the ones they choose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not serving the city the way I wish it would. I think when the city says enforce this, I believe their choice is gone, but they don't agree with me. And I've had arguments with individual deputies about this. The parking at the end of the cul-de-sacs after dark is just a killer to us because of the vandalism and so on. But anyway, I'm trying to get them to kind of enforce what we ask them to enforce, but they argue with me and say, no, it's up to me. When I stop you at a traffic violation, I get to decide whether I write a ticket, not the city, or anything else that happens in the city. So
Well,
I'll leave it at that, but it's a sore spot with me personally right now.
okay. Well, we'll get
the
back
ultimate,
to
the
this.
decision is theirs, but they have the authority to enforce. It's not
Okay.
like they don't have the authority.
Right. That's right, Wayne. Yeah.
If it's a misdemeanor.
Yeah, I don't think we have any felony violations with our ordinances.
Okay,
What about having a private security person that goes around and maybe takes care of some of these problems?
It would just cost us. I would like something like that. I would like us to have our own police, but it's too expensive right now because we are not getting the quick 911 service that I think we need. But they're doing their best, as I hear. So yeah, we could hire what you're suggesting, but we haven't talked about it.
Okay,
But it's questionable though, too, if we hire a personal security person, if he's not a designated law enforcement, then he can't issue citations under the misdemeanor statutes.
Right. I think people don't always know that though. And if they just see a car with a light, I don't know. Sometimes it just deters problems, without it necessarily escalating to, needing weapons or anything, but
Sure, I understand.
okay, number 6, we are looking to have representation from Summit Creek on our committee, and especially someone who's familiar with Summit Creek trails. So I'll just put that out there.
I will call Ben Brindley because I've talked to him about this already and see if he can give me a name or two of citizens over there in Summit Creek.
Okay. In fact, Natalie, is that why you're on the call?
Yeah, I'm here and Michelle Crump is also here, but we're not getting to see your face, Michelle. And anyway, I'm assuming that's why Michelle's here too. So
We'd love to have you involved.
maybe would both like.
Yep,
to do that.
I'm here.
Okay. We will include you on our email lists if we can and keep you updated with, and again, would love to have you involved at any level on the committee that you want to.
Great, thank you.
Will you both text me? My phone number is 801-259-2344 and text me with your contact information and we'll be happy to include you. Thanks.
Okay. Natalie, did you
801
get that?
801-259-2344 and I'm Sherry Berger.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, number 7, and I'll just be quick on this. We have been in contact with BYU and UVU to recruit students who might be looking for an internship or a capstone project or even some kind of class group project. But and it could be a student in civil engineering, landscape management, biology, environmental science, someone who might be interested in doing a project related to the trail or park use or some other, whatever the project might be. And we put those feelers out. Typically those capstone projects, internships take place during the summer and capstone projects are typically a fall curriculum event. So we're, just I've opened the door and waiting for responses there. If any of you have any contacts or ideas for projects that might be well suited to an internship, let us know. We can kind of seek those out specifically. On number 8, update from Woodland Hills Outdoors on a grant proposal. I won't say a lot here. I did route a design, a landscape design that we have for some projects in the park. They include a greenway along the lower mitigation lot on Grizzly with a natural surface trail. And then that trail extends down through the park. And then we'd like to put some fencing in the park. The trick is describing these things in a way that will appeal to the grant selection committee. For example, you don't want to say we're paving a sidewalk. They don't want to, these Utah outdoor recreation grants, they don't want to fund sidewalks. They want to fund natural surface trails. And they want to fund, and instead of saying we're building a new entrance to the park on the east side, we don't say that. We say it's an ADA accessible entrance. When really the intent is to enable moms with strollers and people to kind of walk up through that entrance to the park. So that there is a number of wording issues there. The grant proposal is due on March 19th, and I'll be meeting with I'm meeting with Corbett tomorrow, meeting with the mayor next week, and getting the city's buy-in on this. I've met with a half dozen or so contractors that we have, people that have equipment, materials, and labor that they can donate to make all this happen.
But
So
Greg,
that-
that, just so everybody understands, particularly Natalie and Michelle, that is a grant from Woodland or through Woodland Hills Outdoors and not the city of Woodland Hills.
Yeah, so it's private funding. It'll be volunteer. It's a matching grant. We're asking for a $10,000 grant, of which Woodland Hills Outdoors will provide up to about $5,000 and in cash, and then $5,000 in donated labor, materials, and equipment. So we'll be sending out an invitation for donations to a number of people throughout the city. And I'd hope to have our shopping cart online to demo tonight, but it's not quite ready. I have a development team in Calcutta, and they haven't gotten to it. So Brett, maybe we get your Romanian guys to pitch in. Yes.
Is that a tax-free donation? Like, have you
Yes,
applied
yeah.
for?
501c3 is tax deductible
Great.
contribution. And
Thank you.
as we've told the city, that we have hundreds of people here in town, in our city, that would gladly donate $500 to $1,000 to make this happen. And yet, if you increase their taxes 2 cents, they're gonna scream to high heaven, right? Okay, so that's, and I'll update you on that by email as we approach our submission deadline. Trail access proposal. Sherry, did you want to cover that? And I have a little bit about there.
Yeah, I sent everybody a spreadsheet of kind of what the subcommittee, the Trails Subcommittee, has been thinking about. We need to make some sort of proposal to the city about the access to the switchbacks. And in addition, walk all the trails that are on the general plan to see how those are accessible. But right now, I think the pertinent and pressing issue as spring is rapidly approaching is the switchbacks. We have a major problem up here with parking on Deep Forest Circle. The ordinance has been redone pertaining to motorized vehicles in subdivisions. Wayne, refresh my memory, 11.5 something, I forget, whatever, but that's been redone. So we'd have to hold a public hearing, which means that our committee needs to put together some wording for use, access to the trails for the city council to look at, the planning council, the planning commission to look at, and spring is rapidly approaching. So I don't think we have time for a discussion on that. If you've looked over the spreadsheet, would you send comments? I don't know, maybe we can have a special meeting. I'd have to ask Jody if that's possible, to really talk about this in depth. I think what the Trails Committee, the subcommittee was leaning towards is that Sky Lake access. Corbett has talked about parking up there. The Deep Forest Circle parking is, it's horrendous. It's a liability for the city. It's dangerous up here for safety. I put all this on the spreadsheet that I sent to you. Just kind of the problems, the access, the potential of what happened in the Avalanche concerning switchback 7 up there by the Quakies. Is that going to create any kind of liability for turning around on the trail if the city does deem to permit ATVs and motorized vehicles up there? Because you won't be able to turn around. So perhaps some sort of gate would have to be put up on number 6 so that motorized vehicles couldn't go any further. There's just a lot of issues right now, and spring is coming. So yeah, a lot of moving parts. And what is the city thinking about doing in terms of the debris flow mitigation up there in Broad Hollow? We've met with Ted Mickelson, and he thinks that the trail would still be accessible, even though they're gonna, for what they're thinking about right now in terms of debris flow mitigation. But again, that would be city property, and is the city going to restrict in terms of no trespassing like they have on the other mitigation areas? I don't know. There's just a lot of moving parts that we need to talk with the city about in terms of access to the trail.
Okay,
So I don't know if we can have a special meeting, but like I say, spring is rapidly approaching, and within a month,
I would be open to doing that. And there are some other possible trail access points that I'm exploring right now on kind of the Eagle Nest side that might work out. And I've talked with a couple of residents about those, and I probably want to kind of develop that a bit further before I share all the details, but maybe some promising trail access from Eagle Nest from near my place. Okay.
yeah, and two, I think that we need to make a recommendation to the city. I mean, the access can always change, but anyway, please look at the spreadsheet, and we need to get together and talk about this, because there's huge liability right now for what's happening up here in Deep Forest Circle in terms of construction on Taylor's property and the big equipment, you know, on that easement in building, and people walking up there. And
It's going to be a particular issue when we have Taylor's building up there, and then there's this debris flow mitigation they're talking about, which will be, they said, 7 times the size of what we have on the upper mitigation laws. That's
so let's see if I'll contact Jody, see if we can get together, if everybody agrees to have another Zoom meeting to specifically discuss this trail access. How does everybody feel about that?
I'm available.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Just real quick, because I know we're at 8 o'clock. I also sent you information on the dark sky community. I would like to propose that we recommend to the city that we look into this. It can be a great benefit for our community. It can be an incredible benefit for the citizens in general in terms of looking at our lighting ordinances and the enforcement of those ordinances as far as the lumens and wattage, and particularly around the park with all those new homes going up. If that is like some other homes in town, the park's going to be lit up like nobody's business in terms of looking at a night sky. It would be great if we could have events like the Persetta's meteor shower. You know, that would be an annual thing the city could do. Again, we'd have to get special permission, because I'm sure that would be after 10:30 at night. But this is an incredible organization, and I think it would be a real benefit to the city. So based on the information that I've sent to everybody, I'd like us to look at making a recommendation to the city that we at least move forward in looking at the criteria to become a dark sky community.
So there were several questions I had, and one is that we have to designate a formal point of contact. Is there someone that is either volunteering or wants to be the spearhead that dark skies initiative? Because I'm all for it. I think it's great.
Yeah, Dennis expressed interest in the Natural Resources Committee.
I'm interested in that. I could kind of do that.
And I can share with you, Dennis, additional information that I've researched that gives you the points of contact for the IDA and,
Okay,
but I'd at least like to ask the city if we could proceed with looking into this idea, and would the city council be in favor of this based on the criteria that the IDA sets out for us?
So do we want to make a recommendation, or do we want to take a vote on that recommendation?
Yeah, I'd like to, if we could.
All right, I'll make a motion to put this before the city council for approval to pursue.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Doral, I'll send that to you.
Yes, Sherry, I really appreciated reading what you sent about that. If we could highlight the specific things the city needs to do to move this forward, I'm a real advocate for this as well as I hear the committee is. So if you could dumb it down for us, it would sure help present that.
A
Okay.
big thing on this, Doral, moving forward, if it's something that the city decides they want to bite off, is going to be as they deal with permits and inspections on the house, especially on a final inspection and occupancy, will be that exterior lighting that's on that home. Because there's a home right across the street from Greg Witt that looks like a UFO when he decides to turn on those outside lights. Right, Greg?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Well, the
Yeah.
IDA recommends to the city that they have a lighting, I think it's lighting and landscaping plan submitted as part of the permit process, where the homeowner would adhere to the ordinances set forth by the city. And then the building inspector, of course, would check those things.
Yeah, and I'm just letting you know, that's the burden the city's gonna bear at some point, is the inspection of that. And I don't know if that'd be Corbett or Sunrise Engineering or however that eventually get found out, through the system, Doral,
But it's worth paying attention to. When we built the city building, we had some lights that were offensive, and we got word of that, and the city fixed it. So
and I've got neighbors that have lights that are offensive, and so far I've stayed quiet, but it's getting harder.
well, yeah, it's better to have more darkness.
Yeah.
And
I live in
Sherry,
a mountain community and then light it up, I guess. I still don't understand it, but
Sherry, is there a cost to become a,
It's a
Dark-
$250 application fee.
oh,
And
okay,
you have to meet all the criteria in the package, kind of
Right.
like, applying for college. You have to meet all the
Do-
steps.
do they provide signage that you can put at the entrance to the city saying?
Oh, cool.
It's community.
Yes, they do.
We
Okay.
would be proud to
That'd be cool.
exhibit.
We are a dark sky community. Burglars welcome. No, I'm kidding.
Can you
No,
make
but
people,
they do give us something.
can you require people who have already built homes with bright lights under an existing regulations to then go back and make them change their lights? I mean, I'm all for dark sky. I'm just wondering if legally we can.
oh, my home does not meet the city codes right now. So when they build it, they violated the city codes along with the other two homes in my cul-de-sac. So we leave our lights off, other people in the cul-de-sac don't. So there is a ordinance which comes close, I think, to dark sky.
It
I
does.
thought so too.
It
yeah.
does. It comes very close.
so it's
And there's also
enforcement.
an ordinance that says the lights are supposed to be off at 10:30 at night.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Then maybe it's
Good.
just enforcing, a lot of it might be just enforcing what's already
I
there.
think it is.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful quality of life initiative. And, for wildlife, it's very conducive with who we are as a community, kind of a rural mountain community, outdoors.
Yes, if you read about lighting, the exterior lighting that we bring in as humans does impact the nocturnal cycles of the
Yeah.
creatures that are up here. It does impact them.
Yeah, when my light's on in the kitchen, the turkeys won't roost outside my house.
That may not be a bad thing.
Don't tell people
Don't
that.
tell anybody.
It's also been proven that it reduces the level of melatonin in humans, so they don't sleep as well.
Yeah.
Believe
Hence,
that.
don't leave the lights on in your grandchildren's bedroom when they go to sleep. Anyway, thank you. I'll proceed with getting that information to the city.
Thanks, Sherry.
Okay, well, that really brings us to the end of our business and our meeting. Anything else to add? If not, we will adjourn.
Greg, the only other item I have under other business is Doral, can you, I'm not sure who does this, but can you update the city's website as far as PTR committee?
Oh.
For the, I can't remember the woman's name who's on there. She's the only one that's on there.
Oh, I've already drafted a revision to what's currently on the website. And I sent that to Jody several months ago, but that was before we were actually organized. I'll go ahead and send that off and I'll route that past the rest of you.
Thanks,
Because
Greg.
Jody
That's
got it in the
a good idea.
minutes.
Meeting times
Yeah.
and days.
Okay, that's all I had.
Thank you all.
I motion we adjourn.
I second it.
Second.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks.